Many of you know me. I'm Jen Neumann, CEO of Novo. We are a proud Iowa League of Cities partner. And I chose this session to break up the talk about websites and ADA accessibility. You can call me after this if you do want to talk about that. And we've talked about video and we've talked about producing content and community engagement. But I wanted to dig into community engagement and trust. So last year at the conference, I presented Building Trust in an Era of Mistrust and what the 2025 Edelman's Trust Barometer tells us to a pretty packed room. And I think it was packed because we are all feeling this, that lack of trust in our communities. So whether you've got water quality issues, you're dealing with data centers, or just general community angst and rumblings, I thought we'd dive into one way that you can build and leverage trust in your community. So that brings me to today's topic. The one thing the Trust Barometer has pointed to in the past several years is that businesses and business leaders are trusted by more people. Sadly, government and media, which is, all of our jobs here, are at the bottom of the Trust Barometer. So in 2026, we see the world getting more and more insular, and where trust comes from peers, peers on TikTok and peers on social media and more, let's say, just less official modes of communication, that is increasing, and people are really forming these bubbles of people who agree with them rather than turning to those trusted sources of government and media. But business does still rank the highest. So I'm bringing in some big guns who have or represent who have in the past or do represent the voices of business and how that intersects with local government to drive engagement, trust, and growth. So with us today is Betsy Potter. She is the executive director of Downtown Iowa City. I've worked with Betsy for many, many years at this point in time, before she was even executive director. And I know that she partners with the city of Iowa City on a lot of initiatives and is just such a solid representation of the core businesses in downtown. And then also Doug Neumann, who, full disclosure, is my husband. He was the former executive director of the Cedar Rapids Metro Economic Alliance. He's retired now and doing my bidding and doing a little consulting here and there. But these are two experienced voices that have a lot of experience in how things like SMIDs and bids can help coalesce business around initiatives, how you can drive that trust and engagement with your community by partnering with organizations like that, your chambers and your downtown organizations, your Main Street organizations, and how sometimes it comes down to who's the messenger, right? Sometimes we want to be the messenger, but sometimes we have to pick a different messenger to help drive that. So with that, I'd love it if Betsy and Doug would just if you want to give a little bit more context to who you are and what you've done in your careers, and I'll turn it over to you. I will be watching the comments, and I will, if I see questions pop up in the comments, I'll bring them up. But if you want to raise your hand, and I think people can do that, you can unmute yourself and you can ask questions at any point in time. And then at the end, I'll wrap up and make sure that all questions are asked. And I might do a little light moderating here and there, but I'm just going to turn it over at this point in time to Doug and Betsy. Thank you.
Betsy, you want to go first with a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. So I'm Betsy Potter. I'm with the Iowa City Downtown District. I've been with the organization for about 13 years, but we're a self-supported municipal improvement district, which I think most everyone on the call kind of understands how SMIDs work. But in general, our organization we do function as a nonprofit and we manage the SMID. We just expanded our boundaries, so we're a much larger SMID than we've ever been before as of 3 weeks ago. And our primary work that our organization does, which might be slightly different from other SMIDs throughout the state, is marketing and events, advocacy on behalf of our businesses and property owners in downtown. We do a number of different programs and initiatives, grants, things like that, placemaking, and then we do have a clean and hospitality team too. So that's that encompasses most of our organization's work, and we're here to support the businesses and property owners. And obviously, for this conversation, a lot of that work involves working directly with our local city governments.
Thanks, Betsy. And just a little bit more about myself. 19 years in economic development at what we later called the Cedar Rapids Metro Economic Alliance. I led that organization, did a lot of communications, downtown development, economic development work, some public policy work. I also worked with the city of Cedar Rapids as the chief of staff to Mayor Lee Clancy a million years ago, about 25 years ago. And maybe as of some relevance, I'm not sure who all of these folks are on the call, but if there's some long timers in city government, I was active with the Iowa League of Cities, served a couple of years on the policy committee. And some things never change. I remember lots and lots of heated discussions about rollbacks. At the time, the rollback, I think, had just sunk below 60%, and we were, worried about could we keep it at 60%. Now, I think any of you would be happy to just get to 50% or 60% is a little bit of a dream, but it's good to present to all of the folks here at the Iowa League of Cities, and hopefully we have some stories that are relevant and valuable to everybody as you continue and do your work. You know this, I'm fascinated by the Edelman Trust Barometer thing. I've read a little bit about it. Jen has talked a little bit about it. I am not really a student of it, hadn't really heard about it much until maybe the past year or so. But Betsy, I think subconsciously or almost intuitively, we've always sensed that the one of the most trusted sources is business leaders. You know, when you need to get a community initiative passed, when you want to try to get a champion for something that might be controversial or might be hard to understand and just needs a lot of community buzz and a lot of community conversation, there's no better place to start that than with business leaders and hopefully business leaders in government aligned and combined, right? Of course, you want your city administrators, city managers, your mayors, your council members all singing off the same song sheet as well. But really, to get deeply into a community, we've always found it very, very effective to engage that business leadership component of the community. And I think over the course of the next 45 minutes here or so, we'll tell some stories and tell some whys and tell some hows on that. But Betsy, do you have examples or a place you want to start with some of that?
Yeah, I think in general, a SMID sort of is exactly what we're talking here about, right? We were modeled and built to work directly with the city government on behalf of the businesses and property owners, but the cities use us in the same way, right? In a very positive way. Whenever an initiative comes along that may not be super popular or very complicated to explain to the general public, we're a lot of times one of the first phone calls that the city government makes, either the city manager's office or city council. We meet a lot, and I'm sure it was the same way with your team too, Doug. We meet a lot with city council members. I meet with every single one almost on a monthly basis, not just so that they can know what we're up to as an organization and in downtown, but to hear what their initiatives are so that we can help when it aligns with our goals and ethics and advocacy efforts to make sure that our businesses and customers understand what the initiative is. And I'll just use a quick example. Something like public safety cameras for our community can be very contentious, right? And so the community will very much blow it up online that they don't want public safety cameras. And so this is something that we have been asked to kind of get involved in that conversation. The police department's asking for them. They need them for additional resources. And the community is saying, we don't want to be watched. And the businesses, they don't know where to stand, right? And so a lot of times that's where educated conversations or more in-depth conversations that we can help facilitate between the city and the community really helps through our businesses, because they're our neighbors, they're our employers, they are our friends, because in most of all of our communities, these are small businesses. We're not working with a ton of national chains. We're working with, Joe Smith and your kids go to school with them. So there's an inherent trust because of the nature of Iowa communities in general and between, the business owners, but also we can give them education that they can then pass down through word of mouth, which is the most valuable thing that our businesses can do when they're talking to a customer. So for us, that's a recent example about, public safety cameras, why we need them in the public spaces, why it communicates more than just safety. It, helps us for years down the road. And that's been a big success between the communications from the city to the businesses and then downward to the community. It doesn't sway all opinions, right? It doesn't like shut it all down, but it does help when a customer or an employee is like, wait, why do we need these again? Or why is this important? Or is this, going to be over surveillance? It actually is like, oh, nope, this is the way it's being used. So that's just one quick example off the top of my head that has been a really recent conversation in our own community that our businesses have been really helpful in communicating the overall messaging from the city.
Yeah, yeah. I think sometimes it is education of a brand new thing, or getting the community behind a singular thing, and sometimes it is, as you say, sort of swaying people or a persuasion campaign. Two quick examples from the work that I've done here in the Cedar Rapids area. And this isn't always a partnership that happens, but the Economic Alliance has, for different school bond referendums, sometimes been very hands-off and stayed on the sidelines, sometimes been very, very engaged and sort of leading the campaign. And there's a lot of factors in this, so I'm not suggesting that this was a singular thing, but 2, 3 years ago, Cedar Rapids district ran a school bond referendum and got like 38% support. The business community wasn't overly engaged in that, was largely on the sidelines for that, and came back a couple years later, last year, ran the same campaign, got 59% support. As all of the city folks and public sector folks know on the call, 59% is the worst and most painful number there is, because of course it takes 60% to pass a bond referendum. So we didn't pass that bond referendum, but a 21% improvement, just a huge movement for a number of reasons. But one reason, certainly, that the business community was at the forefront, was raising money, was campaigning, and was, again, a trusted leader on this to get the message out to employees. On the sway and persuasion side of the spectrum, I've told this story often. It's a bit of a dated story now because I'm a bit of a dated guy now in the early days of retirement here. But when I first took over the downtown district in Cedar Rapids, we did a poll of priorities of downtown stakeholders and downtown business leaders. We had 26 different things, from clean and safe to public art to business attraction to retail promotion, downtown housing, safety issues, all of those kind of things. And downtown housing finished 23rd on a list of 26 priorities. But we, as the professionals, the downtown developers, and those who had just done a new downtown master plan, recognized that one of the real missing elements was downtown housing. And we basically, sometimes you listen to the public and you do what the public says. And sometimes you listen to the public and realize that you have to change the public's mind. In our mind, downtown housing was the number one issue that we should be focused on, and was one of the biggest missing elements to really make downtown Cedar Rapids thrive. So we went out on a campaign, and a lot of that kind of work is just one-to-one. Why is this important? They have to understand kind of the why, the how, and the what. Show them the studies, show them best practices in other communities, explain the differences and why we weren't to a point where some people thought we should be. And we got that done. I mean, I think downtown housing ranked certainly in the top 5 of issues for the entirety of the remainder of my time doing downtown development. So it can work both ways. Sometimes you're just signing up volunteers for the Army, but sometimes to make the charge, and sometimes you're actually trying to educate and change minds and sway people to maybe a different opinion and a more well-informed opinion than what they had. So. Betsy, do you, by the way, for folks here, this is completely unrehearsed. Betsy and I we haven't gone through this. We don't have questions. We're really just extemporaneously chatting here, which I love. So if I catch you off guard on anything, Betsy,
Okay.
just pivot and we'll
Sure.
keep charging ahead. But can you talk about kind of how do you get that done? Like, do you have structures? Do you have committees? Do you have you talked about your regular meetings with the city council. What about with business leaderships, your board committees, and then maybe with business leaders that are a little reluctant to like, I'm not serving on the downtown district board, or I'm not serving on the chamber board. How do you stay in touch with them in a formal way or an informal way?
Yeah, I think that for all organizations, whether it's a chamber or a SMID or whatever, Main Street District, the meetings with the stakeholders and the business owners are probably the most valuable thing that we all do. And it's a lot of talking and it's a lot of relationship building. But as you were talking, Doug, I kept thinking, you know, what we have is the ability to do as a business improvement district or a non-city entity is kind of host more informal meetings. A lot of times city meetings are just so formal, right? They have to be publicly posted. What we have the ability to do, which I think really helps provide that additional education when something comes up and there's confusion around it, whether it's, you know, whatever it might be, that housing conversation you were using or public safety, like I was saying, like we can just host a meeting, right? We can do a public safety forum and have community members and businesses come and get experts in to kind of talk about certain things, and the conversation feels a little bit more informal, so people in my experience are very comfortable asking questions or is sending questions ahead of time, and it feels easier to engage with. So I think that's one of the things that we try to do a lot. We have routine meetings, we meet with our restaurants, we meet with our retailers, and it kind of feels repetitive for our staff, right? Because we're saying the same thing over and over again. Same thing we put on the newsletter, same thing we, say to all these groups. We meet with city council, we meet with the city manager's office. A lot of what we do is meeting, but repeating that same messaging and giving people talking points on whatever issue it might be. It could be parking. It really does change the conversation. And I know probably everybody's in the same boat, but it's worth saying, pivoting all these conversations to something positive over time does make an impact. And it was really valuable to not always allow the negative to run rampant in those conversations, because that's very easy to do. And I think we've all been in those rooms where it's just constant, like, oh, but this. So we do try to make sure that all of our meetings are, forward positive. Problem solving is a big thing that we talk about a lot in our own organization. And then obviously we have a board of directors that helps us with that communication too, right? So the trust that businesses have with each other is something that I will never gain. I don't own a business. I work for a nonprofit, but the trust between the businesses to each other is something that is invaluable. So I use my board members a lot, whether it's someone who's a liquor license holder or a bar owner, and I need them to go talk to other bar owners, because I hear, like they have this conversation. What I have to say, or what they want to ask me, may look very different than a peer. And so we do that a lot, is engage with our board members and use them as our tools to communicating with other business members.
Yeah,
Does that
yeah.
help?
And I was thinking too a little bit about trying to be as relevant as possible for the folks on the call today that are taking the time to listen in. And here, Cedar Rapids, Iowa City are a little bit unique animals both, right? And there are certainly communities on the call today that aren't thinking about parking ramps and things of that nature. But I think there's such an incredible opportunity in smaller communities can be so much more effective than we can in a large community. I mean, the Economic Alliance has 1,200 business leaders, business members. Try as you might, you're not going to get to talk to 1,200 people, right? But I think in smaller communities, it gets to be a little bit more like a downtown district, right? Or a SMID. So you have a subsector of the community, and you can almost operate that like a small community could operate. I just think there's a real chance. I also, though, would acknowledge the just how hard it is to find time to do that. I often talk to my team about the boxes, the fourth box, and we organize our time as is it important and urgent? You're going to spend time on it. If it's urgent and not important, you're still going to have to spend time on it because there's an urgent thing right in your place. You try to diminish the not important and not urgent. But the fourth box, the most important box, is the important but not urgent. Nobody's pounding down your door. There's not a fire burning. There's not a public meeting going on that makes you get out and talk to business leadership and makes you be connected to the owner of the locally owned manufacturer in your town. But it's so important, and I think city government can really benefit and find great value in those relationships, not just for a singular initiative, not just because you're trying to pass a bond referendum or you're trying to get a development approved, but just as a matter of course of building those relationships about any of the priorities that the city has going on.
Yeah, I think the relationship building is probably the one of the most valuable things that we all can do, whatever size of community it is. Even just someone told me at the city one time, and it stuck with me for years, is that you can't just show up when you want something. And I think it can go both ways, right? The city can't just show up when they need something from the business community. They need to show up in the good times too. So something that we've been kind of cognizant about is making sure that, the new business openings, a staff member being there to celebrate with new businesses, whatever it might be, is so important to that business owner, and they remember it. And on the reverse, they will be the people that you can contact when you need something back. So it takes a lot of work, to your point, Doug, and it's so consuming, and it can be something that falls off very quickly. But those relationships will be the easiest way to accomplish most of these things. And
Yeah,
I
for
think that's
sure.
what we all rely on.
I have a question to throw in there for you too. There's a balance, right, between overusing business and maybe even particular business members in the community. How do you kind of strike that when it comes to, let's just say, an initiative in partnership with the city? In Cedar Rapids, we kind of have our usual suspects that we tend to call on. I know that happens elsewhere, but how do you kind of not over leverage that at the same time?
Betsy, you want to take a stab at that?
I think that's really hard. I mean, I like in general, being cognizant of it is probably the best thing, and making sure that you or your staff make an effort to communicate and get to know others. That might not be as easy. Of course, there'll be the business owners that are banging down your door, like, how do we connect? How do I get engaged and get to know you? But there's all sorts of different business owners, young and old, that don't know how to do that engagement. And so I think just being cognizant that you have to get more voices around the table, because they're connected to so many different networks that if you're going to the usual players, you're not going to get to the new networks that you need to. You're speaking into the same void that you would be if you're connecting with those same business owners. So it is something that I don't know if there's a good path for it outside of just being cognizant for it and making sure that you reach out to new people.
Jen beat me to the segue there. I was going to move to that next, and I actually have a little like a
Good.
three-point thing, as if we were presenting at a League of Cities conference, or as if we had a presentation, which we don't. I mean, slides and visuals. But one of the I'll try to answer Jen's question, but also talk a little bit about this. I mean, one in my experience, those employers, the what here, right? They're very trusted. They can be very effective in getting out community messages. But often those largest and longest standing and most successful businesses in your community, might not always be the most willing spokespeople or champions of a cause. And it's like, how do you get them to play that role? And it goes to that. If you don't have any intentionality about this, you're going to get all the bankers on your board. You're going to get all the insurance companies on your board. You're going to get all the nonprofit executive directors on your board, and you're not going to get the manufacturers on your board. You're not going to get the light industry on your board because they're busy, right? They're hard to, and it's just not a very natural part of their day to go and be part of the business advisory council at the city, or to be part of the chamber board or the downtown district board. So, I mean, I took a stab at a little bit. This is just Doug Newman's advice. I take it for what it's worth, but. A couple things to think about that engagement piece, and more voices than just the ones that are naturally there. My one, two, three here: leverage the big mouths. Some business leaders do want the microphone, and give it to them. Right? That's great. Those are the easy ones. Be sure to give them a place within your leadership, within your community engagement. I think that there's number two is, establish one or more committees, make it an exclusive club. This might be a little bit controversial. I know I've occasionally taken some complaints for the large investor council that the Economic Alliance put together. Oh, you're catering to big business. You're just catering to the rich people. You're just catering to whatever. But I think having that as a bit of an exclusive club also gets those people to the table that might not more naturally come to the table. So you have to work through that. But it also then serves as a safer place than individuals speaking out on their own, right? The Business Advisory Council wants the community to invest in this. The Business Advisory Council thinks that we should be moving toward this sector of development, whatever it might be, traffic safety cameras, a bond referendum. And there's some safety there where you're still getting the endorsement, the sort of implicit endorsement from these huge community leaders, but they maybe don't have to say, said Dwayne Smith at True North Companies, said the CEO of Collins Aerospace. They get to say it as part of the Economic Alliance's Large Investor Council or your city's Business Advisory Council. And I think it's a way to get those voices involved, maybe the ones who would be most reluctant. And then we've already touched on this, so I won't belabor the point, but the one-on-one conversations. The people that aren't quick to join the chamber board, but you can go out, you have to sometimes meet them, or at least meet them halfway. And again, think about sectors, business sectors that just aren't very likely to come to you if you don't go to them. I think too, and I think this is maybe why Jen decided that Betsy and I would lead this discussion today. But a chamber, a downtown district, an economic alliance, they can be that voice of business. It doesn't have to be every individual business leader that a city reaches out to and partners. I hope that everybody on the call today has a strong relationship, not only with individual business leaders, but with whatever business organization is preeminent in your town. And I want to, Betsy, give you a chance to sort of react to any of that, or give more specific examples. But I want a chance to talk a little bit about, and I think Jen even received a question ahead of time. I want a chance to talk a little bit about how a city can create a formal public-private partnership with an organization like yours. But also, when what I've found far more prevalent than formal PPPs is very informal things, but where there's a trust and a relationship that says, we're not going to put this into a legally binding document, but the city trusts the chamber to do this, or the chamber trust the city to do this. And I'll chime in with some of my perspective on that. But Betsy, you guys have some good examples in Iowa City as well.
Yeah, just to pivot to that, we do have a strong relationship with the city, and it's one of our core values. We have an operating agreement that that's the formal part of like what we expect, what we're expected to do with the city of Iowa City, what they're expected to do. But most of the work happens in the more informal nature, and what a lot of that has to do with personalities and getting to know the city staff, making sure they know our staff, that we have good relationships, that they're on all of our committees. We have a seat on our board as an ex officio for the city of Iowa City. And most of the city manager's office, in one way or another, one of their staff sits on a meeting of ours, so that they can hear what our conversations are, and that what we'll be, communicating toward the city, or they can respond to things. But what has been established over the 14 years of our organization's existence is that if the city is considering to do something that impacts downtown, a streetscape update, a bridge replacement, whatever it might be, they come to us as an organization first, and they ask our opinion. And so we're involved in all of the steering committees or the studies, whether it's a parking study or, the Burlington Street Bridge project that's going to take 2 years. One of our staff members is on every committee, so we can speak on behalf of the downtown area and the downtown businesses. And that is something that's really beneficial for the city, right? They don't have to go out and try to find 14 different opinions or rely on their personal relationships. They can ask us, and we have mechanisms to take feedback, right? We either know what people are going to say because we've built those relationships. We can send out surveys. We can do the walking around and kind of say, hey, what do you think about this streetscape update starting in March versus April? And then we can respond collectively. And I think that's probably the way that the SMIDs are just built for this perfect relationship with the city, is that we are responding on behalf of the business community in trying to get as many voices around the table so that it's more efficient for the city to receive that feedback. We've done that in historic preservation before. Like, should this building be marked as a historic landmark? That's a conversation. And this would be the city overreaching onto a property owner. Super controversial, can be a big conversation. That is something that, like, how does the downtown feel? Let's go to the downtown. It can be an easy scapegoat too. The downtown said, yes, this is like, this will be beneficial. Or it can be something like, hey, we've consulted with the downtown district. And I think that's where that close relationship, to your point, Doug, is like, we have systems in place to like reach out to businesses, or we can respond on their behalf because we've had the conversation 100 times.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Hey, and if people on the call have a specific question, definitely put it in the chat on this. But let me take a stab at that as well. I think the question that Jen received ahead of time maybe implied of formal legal agreements, right? And some of those do exist. We had a formal agreement with the city about economic development services that we were going to provide, right? And they provided us a certain amount of funding, and we had a scope of services that was created for that funding. But I also, and here's where it's great to be retired, because I think potentially I could get in trouble for this, but that makes it fun because I don't care anymore. And but I don't think this is skirting the law or even really a gray area. I think it's a great example of what the private sector can do to support the public sector. Two quick examples. Whenever the city of Cedar Rapids, and I think primarily we did it for Cedar Rapids, but of course we were a regional organization that served the city of Marion, the city of Hiawatha, and I know there are examples where we did this similar things for other communities as well. But the public sector has a lot of very rigid laws in terms of lots of things, right? But when we wanted to hold a reception, to have a big public engagement thing. And it was an evening reception that you naturally wanted to have beer and wine at, or we were hosting an event for legislators. It was very, very difficult for the city to pay for the booze bill. So we paid for the booze bill. And the city might, the city is a big financial partner already with us. There was never a separate transaction that said, "Oh, here's the reimbursement for the booze that you covered." It was just understood that they were going to support us financially, and we were going to help out with some things that were challenging for them to pay for. So, an informal agreement. Another one that I think we were very, very proud of, and if anybody out there wants the specifics, I could work to gather them up. I don't remember all this stuff really clearly anymore. But in 2016, when Cedar Rapids had a more minor flood than the 2008 flood, but still a bunch of businesses were evacuated, lost a number of business days, took a while to get back into business. There was a small business recovery grant program, and the city largely funded it, but it would have taken the city a long time to get that in place, going through the bureaucracy, getting the approvals that they needed to get. And one of the things we know about disaster recovery, especially for small businesses, is that the speed of that funding is critical. People need to make the next payroll next week. People need to make the next round of utility payments the next month. And we learned that in 2008. So we said, hey, in 2016, we're not going to wait around for 30 or 60 or 90 days to get this done. We need to get checks into the hands of these businesses immediately. And the city funded the Economic Alliance to run the program. The city didn't have to set up the program. The city didn't have to make transactions with dozens and dozens of small businesses. The city made a single transaction and then trusted the Economic Alliance and that committee to execute this program. So I think that certainly does take trust. At that point, it's the chamber in charge, or it's the downtown district in charge, or it's the Economic Alliance in charge. But I hope cities look for opportunities to do things quicker and maybe get into some tricky, rigid areas of law that where a city just can't do something, rely on your business community to get it done for you in exactly the same way that you wanted to do it, but you basically serve as a pass through. So I hope that answered the question to the person that submitted that. Again, if you have any details, we'll leave some contact information at the end. I can still find some of this stuff. We did have some formal public-private partnerships. We did have a formal MOU with the city about economic development services and some other things. But I have far more examples of very informal things that never took a signed agreement, never took a legal review, never needed a public meeting.
Yeah. And I would just add, like, we don't have, I always joke about wanting Holly Corkery on every call I'm on from Lynch, Dallas. She's not on this call today, but the regulations and the laws around things like 28Es and the likes are pretty specific and not something that we cover necessarily in a call about communications, but that is where I always say that's where you want to consult your legal counsel. Doug's like I say a little untethered now, and like he said, he doesn't care anymore. But those MOUs and that trust that's built up, allowing your local business organization or allowing business to be your voice at times can help not only deliver things quicker and in an unbureaucratic way, but as we talk about trust, it can lend some additional credibility to what you're trying to do. The other question that we got was about libraries and partnerships with businesses. And, both Cedar Rapids and downtown are so lucky to have beautiful libraries right in the center of our downtowns. And I thought maybe, Betsy, if you wanted to touch on partnerships and how businesses help your library be successful in downtown Iowa City, that would be great.
Yeah, our library is incredibly important to our downtown mix. It brings the most diverse group of people to our downtown on a daily basis. So the hundreds of thousands of visits that come down specifically for the library is incredibly important to the business community. And on the reverse, I do think that the placement of our downtown library amongst the businesses next to an urban playground, near the splash pad in the summer is incredibly important to why people come to the library. Whether you're a family, I have two little kids myself, we go down to go to the library, but we're going also to like have lunch at Bread Garden, right? It's like we make a day of it. And so that's what we see a lot. And so our businesses find the library very, very important. It also provides a ton of resources for our community, right? We know libraries are just there for story time and checking out books, but it is a hub for people looking to to have access for whether it's restrooms, meeting rooms, Wi-Fi connections. A number of we have a downtown ambassador cleaning crew. A number of them filled out their applications at the library because they may not have personal computers at home. So it's an incredible resource that we try to leverage as much as possible and drive people to. And our businesses definitely recognize that. And on the reverse, the library itself recognizes the importance of the businesses around it because people want to come to a place that they can do multiple things at once, right? They don't want to just go to the library with their kids and then have to also go somewhere to get food or whatever it might be. So the intersection between those two elements is incredibly important for our community. We don't have any satellite libraries in Iowa City. It's just this one. So it's incredibly important for making sure that downtown stays the hub for families and for the entire community that's visiting for all of the resources that our library provides, for sure. Does that kind of answer it, Jen?
Yeah, and I guess one question, and the answer might be I don't know, but have you either of you seen instances where businesses are partnering with the library to help the library get something done, whether it's capital campaign, whether it's a particular program, or anything where you've seen successful partnerships in that?
Yeah, I mean, not to jump over you here, Doug, but there's a foundation with our library, and a number of our businesses are contributors to the foundation. And also a number of our business owners sit on the library board of directors because they care so much about the direction of the library and what's happening, not just in the building, but all of the resources that they provide too. And they do all sorts of partnerships, whether it's, bring in your library card and you receive, a discount or whatever it might be. Those businesses are definitely using that relationship with the library to help themselves, but also to help move the needle forward with what the library might needs to.
And I think the libraries are a good example of where smaller communities have an advantage over larger communities. This was just coincidental, and it was dumb luck that Charity Tyler, who's the executive director of our library foundation, happened to serve on the Economic Alliance board when she got that job. So we wound up to have this incredible connection, but it was really just serendipity that Charity happened to be our connection. And I know, again, things that I probably would have had to keep secret before I retired, but we definitely provided a large investor list of chamber members to Charity when she set out on the capital campaign for the new West Side Library in Cedar Rapids. So I know she was helped tremendously by the Economic Alliance and by the relationships that we have. But if she hadn't been in place, in a larger community, you can get an issue like that where you have no connection to the issue. I'm not sure what our intersection would have been with the library project if that hadn't happened. Where I think in a lot of mid-size Iowa communities, a lot of the communities that the Iowa League of Cities represents, you're so much more likely to have people serving on the boards, on committees, on city council that have tentacles into almost any important community issues. So, again, some of these things I think we happen to be the ones asked to talk today, but I bet others on the call have just great examples of community engagement with their business community, and again, maybe even easier when you don't have 1,200 businesses who are members of the chamber, or you're not in a town of 150,000 people.
I think that's a great point. At this point, because we have about 15 minutes tops left, I would love it if Doug and Betsy would kind of share anything else they want to tell you about partnering with business and how to really leverage business, or any final thoughts. And then if you have any questions, why don't you just come off mute now and I will watch for that. And if we don't have any questions, then we get a few minutes back in our day. So anything else, Doug and Betsy, you wanna add, or you want to make sure you impart to the group today?
Betsy, I think on the email that we exchanged, you had a couple other pretty interesting projects. You want to touch on a couple of those for a minute or two, ones that we didn't do it all yet?
Sure, I'm gonna have to remember what those were. But one of the examples that I can remember off the top of my head is that we, as many communities do, we have a lot of historic buildings in downtown that are either being well taken care of or not. And they're starting to show their age. And one of the greatest partnerships I think that we have with the city is that we were able to communicate that the need to restore or just even maintain these historic properties is very onerous for property owners. Property taxes have gone up. Inflation has taken a huge hit. A lot of people can't afford to keep these properties at the stage that they want to keep them for our businesses, right? Because a lot of our properties are not owned by the business owners themselves. So the city of Iowa City, hearing that and the need from the downtown businesses and properties, recognize that downtown is a big part of their tax base and it's super important to the overall operations of the city. So they did put together, and I know Des Moines has one, and I'm sure Cedar Rapids and other communities do too. They call it the Building Change Program. It's larger grants that property owners can apply for. I think this one was up to $50,000 or $100,000 to do specific improvements to buildings that would benefit downtown overall. And that direct connection came from our business owners communicating to us saying, we need this help. We need some sort of grant program. And the city saying, okay, give us a couple of years. It wasn't overnight. It wasn't something they just had lying around, but give us a couple of years to implement a program where we can support property owners on specific improvements. A lot of it's windows, insulation, things like that. But that's a real program that has been very beneficial, that the city was very happy to invest in, and it has been overall really great for downtown. Another one was climate action. That's a big, like our climate action commission has big goals, and it's not always understood by the community and exactly what is needed or why so much funding needs to go into it. The Fare Free program under the Climate Action Initiative was kind of a confusing thing to explain, I think. Why do we need free buses? Why do free buses are important for a community of our size? And the city did come to us and say, survey your businesses. Do they want free fare? Is this important to them? Who's going to use the free fare buses in downtown? And, since the program's been going on for a few years, we continue to get that engagement from the city. What do the businesses feel about this program? How are they using it? Are they seeing customers use it? And what we found is not exactly what they were expecting to hear. It's not necessarily we've seen a flood of customers using it. What we've seen, and this is helpful for the city to know, is that employees are using it to get to and from work, right? And they weren't expecting that. They were expecting more that, people can move around town, they can go out to dinner, whatever it might be. It's actually people getting to and from their jobs mostly that are using the Fare Free, and the reason why they've switched from cars or bikes to the buses year round. So those are just another couple examples that, when we were talking about this subject, that came to mind. Our Clean and Safe program, to your point a little earlier, Doug, that is heavily funded by the city, but they could never go out and get that contract. So we own the contract, and they mostly pay for it, and then we manage it because they don't want to manage it. And I don't blame them. And they would have to go with the lowest bid for services. And that's not what we were looking for. So I think that's probably our largest partnership between the city to accomplish something that our businesses wanted, our community wanted, and that we can just get it done a lot quicker, which is the advantage of, chambers, as to your point a little bit earlier, and business improvement districts and main streets can do these things really, really fast because you have hardworking staff.
Yeah. Another parallel to that, that's true in Cedar Rapids, but absolutely takes some trust, right? Because the city government is saying, okay, we're not going to control this, but we trust you to control it. We might help fund it, but the parking system in Cedar Rapids is privately managed and privately operated. It's publicly owned. But then through an MOU, it's a business leader board that's really setting rates and hiring the operator, and been a very, very successful program. But that was tough to get done back in 2010 when we first got that done. But it's been an amazingly successful program. Jen, to answer your question just on the what else do you have? Two other last two notes of my chicken scratches on Post-it notes in here, and these are kind of non sequitur. But first, cities, remember that you also are an employer. You might get defensive about the Edelman rankings. Oh, there's government at near the bottom, and business leaders or employers is actually the terminology at the near the top of that list. And again, I'm not an expert on all of that. That says, but cities are major employers in your community, and don't forget your role about communicating to your employees, not only the policymakers at the top of the food chain, but all of those frontline workers. They very likely trust you as their employer, even though you're government and allegedly lower on that list. Something to just keep in mind. And then again, I'm kind of jumping around, but just my last thoughts of things that I thought we might discuss today is the why those business leaders are the most trusted. Some of it is just longevity. I know certainly some politicians are there for a long, long time, but a lot of politicians are in and out. They serve for a term or two. They're here and gone. That's certainly true of some business leaders as well. They can be quickly in and out. A topic we didn't really delve into today, but that we've really struggled with in Cedar Rapids is the difference between a locally owned business and a globally owned business. We don't have as many local headquarters as we used to have. And I think, if you're gonna, in that fourth box, how you make time when you don't have any time to go out and establish these business relationships. Think about those family-owned, locally owned businesses. A lot of trust is just inherent in. I remember when I did the same thing with your grandpa, two generations ago in this business, or your mom and I worked on this similar community initiative 20 years ago. There's so much that happens there. So. Just a couple of thoughts, maybe not in the stream of things, but Jen, where do we go from here?
Well, I don't see anybody coming off mute. I'm going to give people a few seconds to do that if we do have any last questions. But I just want to, first of all, reiterate the opportunity that exists for cities to partner with local businesses and the voice of local business through whether it's your SMID, your chamber, your economic development group, whatever that might be, is such a valuable resource. I know that you all are probably utilizing them to some extent, but if this has sparked any ideas for you today, I certainly hope that was the case. So I just want to end with a few housekeeping things. First of all, thank you to Doug and Betsy. I have put Doug, Betsy, and my emails all in the chat for everybody. If you have questions after the meeting or didn't feel like coming off mute or your microphone's not working, whatever the case, please reach out to any of us with any of your questions. Or we're always happy to talk more about this. We're all really pretty passionate about this. And we do not have office hours formally scheduled yet, but I'm going to say tentatively save the date in October for October 21st. We will confirm that with League of Cities and make sure that we're not scheduling something over something else there. But more information and a topic will be coming out. Of course, you can always, if you have a topic that you want us to cover, that is at least tangentially related to communications or marketing, please reach out and share that with us as well as your questions. So with that, I gave people time to come off mute. Nobody's feeling very talkative. Thank you again, Doug and Betsy. Really appreciate your insights, your historical perspective, and Doug's untethered now, and apparently he'll just say anything. I hope that this was useful to everybody, and I want to thank you for being here today. So
Betsy, it was so good to see you. Take care.
Thanks. Good to see you guys.
yeah, thanks everyone. Have a great day. See you in October.